Hi, my name is Chris Little, and I am the host of The Lifestyle Chase. In 2018, I started this show to have meaningful conversations. I've interviewed over 100 different people, both in and out of the fitness industry. This podcast is something I'm incredibly proud of. Welcome to Season 4. Thanks for joining me.
All right, so welcome to The Lifestyle Chase, and I have brought back a guest that was last on the show for February 6th, 2020. It's episode 98 if you want to go back. And the person that is on the show today is Jeb Stuart Johnston. And how are you on this fine day?
Good. I didn't realize that the last time we talked was right before the world collapsed.
Well, it's crazy just to look back on these because I've been bringing back a lot of guests, and a majority of them I last talked to on the show right before with no idea what was coming and no preparation. Yeah. So
no, that's wild.
What has essentially changed for you since that time? I know what's happened, but let's fill in the audience as to what's happened.
Well, God, for me, really everything. I mean, I was kind of in that process. I think I was kind of in the infancy of kind of my new model of nutrition and behavior coaching, the kind of thing I was putting together, that I was kind of grabbing at a lot of things and trying out a lot of things and trying to see what was, working with my values and my systems, and how my approach was growing and changing, and how I could solve problems in a better way. And then right after we talked, I went down to present in Costa Rica. We had the with Ben House's project, Bro Research. We all had to present our own research projects. And mine was on mindfulness and fat loss. And it was a tough project. And, good friend Dean Guido and I were both kind of working on, separate things, obviously very separate. But at the same time, we're both very competitive. So every time he got something done, I was like, well, now I got to get it done. I can't let him do better than me. And so we went down. It was great because we pushed each other really hard, and then came back from there. And while we were down there, we got even closer as friends, and we decided to kind of join forces and start working on a podcast together. And we did The Pump, which is kind of on hiatus now. We're going to be bringing that back this week. We've got our first new episode in quite a while after Dean had a child, and there was a lot. Then there was also this global pandemic going on, a lot going on. But since then we've got that going. I was formerly working with Stronger You. I left and went out on my own. So now I'm 100% solo. I was a contractor for many years. Now it's all on me, which I love. I have an emotional eating skills course group that works with people who are struggling with emotional eating skills. And then I also have a bunch of regular nutrition clients. And then I work with a group of strength athletes as well. And then also doing some projects with some other people that will come to light in the next few months. For the fourth quarter of next year is going to be a big year for me and some of the projects that are going to start launching then. And so that's really exciting. And then it's been a crazy year, but it's I saw it coming. I was telling Dean, back in 2019, it was like I feel like we're on this roller coaster where it's like I'm watching the climb. I'm watching all my friends in the car with us, and we're kind of getting that hill, and it's going to hit the top. And once it starts rolling, be ready, because it's going to run fast. And COVID slowed it down quite a bit, but it's still moving pretty fast. So it's been a wild year.
Well, I mean, you also relocated. What's that been like living in a different area?
So obviously, traumatic year. Being someone, I was in Costa Rica when the shit kind of hit the fan, and we were like, they were worried they were going to lock down the airports. I was leaving. I got home. I'm in the cab from on the 4-hour ride to the airport, and they're saying that the NBA's canceled their season. I'm like, well, this this thing that when I left for Costa Rica was like a flu that we were a little worried about. By the time I was leaving Costa Rica to come back to the States, was a full blown, fear. Like this thing was really happening. So I went back to New York City. We obviously were the epicenter, and just got decimated. It was terrible. It was, a lot of people left. So I was in New York that I don't think anyone's ever experienced before this time. Maybe, and now because people couldn't leave in the 1800s when the Spanish flu came. So this is something that's probably never been experienced in New York, in that you could walk down Times Square and not see a single person. It was completely insane. It was unreal. You couldn't leave. Some people live in neighborhoods and places where they can walk around. We couldn't walk around outside without masks on. You were scared to go to the grocery store. You couldn't really get grocery deliveries. Like you'd wait up all night trying to get the Amazon delivery. If you got a window, you would just you would buy whatever they had. And it was a nightmare. Really, it's very traumatic. Like thinking back on it, 'cause, I can't even. It's almost like blocked out. It's very, very blurry, actually. And then my wife and I were both working from home in 600 square feet. And so we got to the point where we needed a break. We decided to rent a house in Charleston, South Carolina, because we were both working from home anyway. So we came down, rented a house here for a month. I have some friends from New York that had moved down here over the past, few years. And we loved the neighborhood we were in, and we went with a realtor and started looking at some houses and kind of impulse bought a house while we were down here, and then went home and figured out how we were going to move down. And I thought I was going to hate it, but my wife was really kind of struggling in New York at the time, and because of the pandemic and because of everything and not traveling and not seeing people. And so I kind of was like, if this is what we have to do, we have to do it, and came down, and I kind of love it. Like I never realized how stressed out I was until I left. And now I'm down here. I have a gym in my garage, and I've got my own office, and we got a puppy because we have this backyard, and we're 15 minutes from the beach. So I was at the beach pretty much every weekend this summer. And and then my friend Ben from Costa Rica moved to Asheville, which is about 4 hours away. So even during the pandemic, I drove up there a few times and hung out with him. And my dad's, over in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is also about 4 hours from here, which is nice. And he's thinking about buying a retirement home down here, which is lovely. And it's been awesome. Like I'm very adaptable though. So I grew up moving all over the place. So it doesn't take much for me.
Well, it's been cool to see how things have kind of changed for friends in the industry, and like how you wouldn't necessarily like sign them up to have to go through the tough parts, but it's so good to see what came out of it. Like just to see people having maybe more balance or more, just more fulfillment in life. Like seeing you do a workout in your home gym is kind of cool, because a person can understand like that feeling of structure and comfort and happiness, and like actually enjoying the workout and reducing some of the stress factors and everything like that. Like what was it like as you kind of found your flow in your own home gym space?
Well, during COVID, it was pretty important because I had my private studio in New York. So I kind of could go work out. I also had there was a cable station in my apartment complex. So, I was able to work out. My workouts were garbage, right? They were terrible. I'm looking back on those months, and like, I went in and worked out, but I wasn't really doing anything. Like it was just like going through the motions, which at the time that was fine. That was really all I had the capacity to do. And then when I came down here, South Carolina was not exactly, they don't push higher education here. So there was not a lot of masks. There's not a lot of even, I don't know that they really believed that COVID was a thing. So I was not risking a public gym situation down here. At least not at first. And I'm not, like, the weird thing about all this is being in New York, I'm the kind of person like, I'm going to wear a mask going out. Like, of course I got vaccinated right away. Like I'm very much, I look at the evidence-based practices and I adhere to those. And I also do things to try to make other people comfortable. But I also, like, to be completely honest, like I kind of had that, like, okay, well, you know what? Like I'm not super worried. Like I'm probably, I could get this, but I'm not like super scared of, what could happen. I probably should have been more worried, but regardless, my wife was, was kind of nervous about it. So I just stayed home mostly and worked out here. And, It was great. Like I brought my studio down because I knew that COVID, like I wasn't gonna be able to buy equipment. So, I spent a lot of money to ship a lot of heavy, like a squat rack, all my barbells, my safety squat bar, my trap bar, my weights. I had a leg press hack squat that I brought down that I actually sold. And I just bought a commercial hack squat for my tiny gym. And then, so I've kind of swapped things since the COVID prices have dropped to normal again. But yeah, it was imperative to me because, I know that there's a lot of people that had to do like body weight stuff and if I'm being 100% honest, I'm just not going to do that. Like, I know me, like if I'm not in like, working to failure on heavy sets of like just kicking my ass, it's going to be really hard for me to find the desire to train. And, even though that's something I would preach to my clients, like, no, you can't be all or nothing, all this. Like, I just know me. And it's like, I'd probably go for walks. Maybe I would have started jogging or something, but I wasn't going to go out and do body weight squats and push-ups. Like, just, maybe I would do it for like a couple minutes and I'd be like, I'm done. So it was good. It was good to have that gym. I was able to kind of hit the things I needed to. And then I found this gym. It's about a half hour away. That's probably one of the best bodybuilding gyms I've ever encountered. And they keep buying new equipment. They're a private 24-hour gym. So I had like a key fob and got in like the founder's rate. And so I started training there and it was awesome. And so I kind of go back and forth. So it's kind of a supplemental thing for me. But, I'm probably going to end up building a bigger shed on my backyard and building basically a small commercial gym. Cause I like bodybuilding. Like I hate sport specific training. Like all my friends are, sports performance coaches and they try to get me to do I hate it. Like doing jumping lunges or Bulgarian squats or anything with a kettlebell is terrible for me. Like put me on a machine and let me just go to failure. That's my favorite stuff. So that's what I'll end up building a place with a bunch of machines and when I can, and that'll be my midlife crisis project.
Well, I mean, that's awesome. And just the fact that you're honest about like what works for you, like what you could see yourself doing and what you could not see yourself doing. I think that's kind of important for people. Like I can relate in many ways where there's always things that I could do, but there's things I'm most likely to do and things that I'm not very likely to do. And I tend to lean into the things that I'm most likely to do when it comes to my own fitness. As I was preparing for this episode, I was going through some of your past articles and stuff that you got featured on your website. And something that got my attention was mindfulness with regards to nutrition. Because myself, I am big into just what mindfulness can do, but I didn't really realize how much of an impact it has until I was forced to from the pandemic. And now I've placed a much higher value on it than I once did. But I like how you speak to things like this. So I kind of want to pick your brain and just kind of unpack that article and your thoughts and just take the floor.
Yeah, so I mean, that article was pretty much based solely around the project that I did for Ben Houses. So I just basically took the research I did for that. And the title of the article is Mindfulness, a legitimate tool for fat loss. And the short answer is, against my own bias, was probably no. It's probably not super effective for fat loss. The reason being is if we look at of what mindfulness helps us to do, right? It can slow down our eating. That's great. If we're talking about guys who, and I'm going to stereotype a little bit, but having worked with, well over 1,000 nutrition clients, I can tell you people fall into, some buckets. Men tend to be the ones that eat fast. Women tend to eat a little bit slower. Applying a mindfulness or a mindful eating approach to someone who's already eating slowly, probably not going to negate a lot of stuff. Now, where it could be helpful. And again, so I'm talking with general populations here. So if you're just trying to go on a weight loss diet without any cognitive oversight, and when I say cognitive oversight, I'm referring to some type of dictate that says whether it's a meal plan or if it's a flexible template or if it's calorie counting or macro counting. If you don't have one of those things, it's going to be very difficult to quantify fat loss results, right? Because we can use a mindfulness approach and which is fantastic for weight maintenance, for increasing behavioral change. But again, it's not about losing weight. It can't be, because the mindfulness part is just being aware, having acceptance, etc. So mindfulness in and of itself is probably not a very good tool for weight loss. And that was my conclusion through this, by looking at the research, looking for mindfulness-based approach, looking through acceptance-based therapies, dialectical behavior therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, some other mindfulness practices that were utilized in there, did not seem to show a marked effect on fat loss versus either no intervention or a basic nutritional intervention. And those basic nutritional interventions are basically like, they tell people to eat a low-fat diet. Like, that's it. So now, do we know the exact methods of mindfulness? Things like that? No, but we can probably extrapolate the best we can, because again, nutritional studies are going to be very much based on qualitative data. None of these things were done in a metabolic ward, so we don't have exact calorie counts. There's no calorie matching. Not that would even make sense really for a mindfulness study. So to the best of my understanding, it doesn't look like it's a benefit for fat loss. Now, the more important thing to me, though, is that it does look like it's very important for weight maintenance. And weight loss is always the target, but being in this industry for a long time now, the target is actually the wrong target, right? Most nutrition programs and nutrition coaches and diet coaches and all these people, they'll help you lose weight, but done in a manner that is not effective long term. This approach is pretty damaging, and it's not helpful. And it's why we have a $46 billion a year diet industry that recycles the same people over and over again. It's because people lose weight, gain it all back, generally losing muscle mass in the dieting process, gaining fat mass in the regain process. So they're actually a worse place in terms of adiposity afterwards. And so to me, the actual target now in my approach, in my practice, is about weight maintenance. So that mindfulness approach allows us the space to start to understand our behaviors, to start to have the awareness, to start to have the acceptance of where we are. And therefore we can use those tools to move us forward in that weight maintenance and understanding of how we can better our understanding within there. And a lot of that I'll utilize what I would call a values-based approach. We look just in the research of what does mindfulness do within the brain. It helps with myeliniation, which is habit formation. It has effects on the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is, how we learn behaviors. So there's a lot of pieces, both from a structural, biological, neuroscience standpoint, and from for lack of a better term, spiritual kind of side, where it allows people to feel more at peace and more in place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that last part that you really spoke to resonates with me. It's kind of like how my role in the industry is more on the long-term journey rather than the changes so much. It's more about finding things that help you holistically or just throughout more of your life than just the gym. And something that I kind of wanted to dive a bit deeper on is just the emotional realm of nutrition and coaching and habits and all that stuff. How would one regulate their emotions when it comes to making choices and being mindful, etc.? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, emotional regulation is a cornerstone of what we work on in my emotional eating group. It's really a cornerstone of everything. And it's pretty complex, right? There's probably not a real simple, sorry, my dog is barking. Daisy! They're sleeping. My dog's just sitting on his bed, just barking at the window. There's probably nothing there.
All good.
So emotional regulation, just, it's pretty complex. But it comes down to we can utilize mindfulness practices to start to work towards emotional regulation. We can basically, we're going to always be working on creating space. And that's a term I'll use a lot because creating space allows us to start to look at what is factual versus what is feeling. And, I hate that in the last, couple years that this facts versus feelings thing has been co-opted by like total douche canoe, like guys who, talk about like, oh, if your facts don't care about your feelings. And those guys all are actually the most like people living in their feelings, just being angry and douchey. But from an empathetic standpoint, it can be very helpful to look at the facts of a situation. And so, I heard it put, and I can't remember who to attribute this to, so I apologize ahead of time. But if you were in a situation, and let's say police officer shows up and asks you to describe the scene of what just happened, right? You're in an argument or something, you call the cops, or your car wreck or whatever. And your car, let's say your car got hit by someone at a red light. And the cop says, so what happened? You're like, well, I was getting up this morning and my husband was just being unreasonable and treating me like, no. What happened? Well, last week I had the worst week and everyone was being mean. No. What happened? So often what we do, instead of discussing what is going on with us, we start talking about how we feel about a situation. And let's think about any kind of narrative, any kind of story that we tell. There's almost always a protagonist and an antagonist. And who are we in the story? Are we ever the bad guy? Of course not. We're always the good guy. So there's always some protagonist or antagonist that's just out there to get us. And we're narrative creatures. So we have to create a narrative around it. The narrative is never really about the facts. And so when people talk to themselves about their nutrition journeys or their fitness journeys, there's almost always a lot of blocks, a lot of justifications, a lot of resistance that's all based on things that are not factual. And so when someone says, I just can't lose weight, you say, well, you just told me that you've lost weight, you've lost 50 pounds 3 different occasions over the last 3 years. So that's not a factual statement. Well, I meant I can't keep it off. Well, you've kept it off for how long? And then you gained it back. So you can for a certain amount of time, right? Well, I just can't control myself around sugar. You just told me you went out last night and you were able to, have a meal and have a bite of that cake and that was enough and you felt good about it. So often we have this narrative that we tell ourselves that is based solely in an emotional reaction to something, a thought, a feeling, not necessarily a fact. So as we start to work on these things, we start to separate in our daily life our fact from fiction. We work on things like a pros and cons list, right? How does engaging this behavior help me? How does engaging this behavior harm me? How does not engaging this behavior help me? How does it harm me? Right? All of a sudden, we start to be able to take these things that are nebulous, floating ideas that can really be kind of weighing down upon us. We can break them down into realistic little bites. And as we start to do that more and more, and as we work on acceptance, right? The first key to all this, of course, is acceptance. We have to accept where we are in order to want to change. If we don't do that, we're just going to sit there and have a whole lot of I shoulda, and not going to be, this is where I am. Yeah, I could have started dieting 6 months ago and be in a different place, but I didn't. So it doesn't matter. Here's where I am. I am happy with myself where I am, but I would like to get better. I am content now, but I want to get better. That acceptance piece lets us move on. Then we start working on all these other pieces. As we do, we start to find that like when that thought or that emotion or that feeling comes up, does it have to lead to an action? Does it have to lead to a behavior? Because those behaviors and thoughts and emotion influence one another both ways, right? A thought can go to an emotion, can go to a behavior can go to an emotion to a thought, any of those things. So as we start to break those pieces down, we stop living in emotion. Instead, we can live for emotion, right? Because emotions are necessary. We need them. They're helpful. But we also need to live in a logical and fact-based life if we want to make changes, because we can't change ideas. Really, we have to change things that are facts, that are there, that are trackable, that are measurable, and then we can change our behaviors that go around with that.
So I love that. There's a lot that a person will hopefully latch onto as they're listening. And something that I think about when I think about like emotional eating or just emotions in general is how much having I guess bringing it back to mindfulness, how much mindfulness can help and how it looks different for everybody. Like people are going to have different routines and there's no like one way to do it, and it's going to be very context specific. But with regards to your experience, having gone through everything that you went through in this pandemic so far, I can imagine there's a lot of emotions that have come with it. So for you personally, what has been your like mindfulness practice, or what kind of keeps you from making up those stories for the cop kind of thing that don't pertain to the solution at hand?
Well, I mean, I've meditated for years, and one thing I have to point out of the pandemic is I haven't really struggled that much. Like there was some traumatic stuff, but it was more about the people around me. The pandemic is like fifth or sixth on the least like dangerous things that I've been through. Like, I mean, a few years prior to that, we were in Puerto Rico when Sandy hit, and we got stranded there for weeks. I mean, I've been to rehab like 5 times, been to jail a bunch of times. At one point I was facing a 25-year prison sentence. Like, to me, the pandemic was like, yeah, great. I got to stay inside a little bit. Cool. Fine. Like, I mean, once you faced a 25-year prison sentence, like a year in your own house is not that bad. So like, I have to put that out there. Like, it was not that hard for me. But I've practiced meditation for years. Got pretty involved in a rehab I was in about 10 years ago in Pennsylvania. I spent 4 months in a rehab facility there. And I was there with a guy who was a pretty heavy practitioner of Shambhala. And I was kind of delving into it. Like I had read a lot of Zen, and when I was like 17, I had read Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and that started me down that kind of path of exploring mindfulness. I was big into psychedelics up to that point. So like, I know psychedelics are a big thing again. Like this is back in the 90s. I ran through them all. So I was, really into that, exploring other kind of parts of the mind. And mindfulness meditation, to me, has always it's very similar to psychedelic experiences. It allows me to tap into a part of the psyche maybe that's not there. Now, perhaps my extensive use of psychedelics earlier in life allows that to occur, which I think is probably a pretty valid observation. But that mindfulness practice is always carried through. So I meditate. I mean, I've got my little meditation, my Zufu here, my little pillow, and I try to stretch one foot over a knee because I'm so inflexible. That's my real challenge, is sitting and not like having everything just hurt after 10 minutes. But that lifting is, to me, that's a practice of mindfulness. I'm 100% present. Now that I've been able to get back to jujitsu is, I mean, there's nothing you can be mindless and try to not be present in the moment when someone is trying to choke you unconscious. And I guarantee you'll come back in the moment pretty quickly. Like, it's amazing how fast that simulated death brings you into the moment. So jiu-jitsu is a great one for me. It's talk about ego depletion, like that it's been one of the best kind of forces in my life. Obviously, it was missing for a long period of COVID. But yeah, I mean, those are the things. And I'm a pretty even dude now. Like, I mean, I used to not be at all. I mean, I'm a very, very different person than I was, even 10 years ago, but like, especially like 20 years ago. I mean, 20 years ago, I was a, goddamn animal. I'm totally emotional. Like there was only one, it was like 0 to 100, and it was almost always anger. But ruled by emotion. Like, and now I'm pretty far from that. And I credit meditation to a lot of that, but it's also just getting older too. Like, and the influence of my wife and being sober, honestly, being sober, like that's a big one for me. I don't push that on anyone else, but for me, alcohol is just not something that works for me. And so I don't drink anymore. And that's probably been, actually, I can't say that. Not drinking is the number one thing. That's the one thing I just live by is I can't drink. As long as I don't drink, I'm pretty good. Like my life is in pretty good shape. And the cool thing too is about like this pandemic and all these things, like I've had periods where I've made a ton of money. I've had periods, I've been bankrupt. Like I said, I've been to jail. I've been totally broke, and not one of those situations had made me happy or unhappy. It's just where I am in that time. And knowing that, like if I lost everything tomorrow and like, still had my wife, my dogs, like, I'll find a place to live and I'll, bust tables or I'll find something to do and be okay. Like I'm not above that. And so having that kind of grounding to me, it makes it all easy. It just, I think, I'm a little bit of maybe not really a nihilist, but I think a lot of us are so self-important and worried about clawing on to whatever the little stuff we have that we get lost in the actual purpose of what's going on.
Well, all the additional context that you dropped there is pretty important because I think for a person that's just getting to know you, they're not going to know how much you've had happen in your life. They're not going to know that you used to cut people's hair or your entry into the fitness industry or your musician background. So with that being said, I hope people go listen to the first episode that you were on just to kind of get a bit more backstory and listen to the shows that you've been on aside from the Lifestyle Chase. Like that's something that I've done that I found to be very interesting and cool because like every single episode you're on, you have a new story to bust out because it's just endless life experiences.
Yeah. But I've got a few stories, that's for sure.
Well, and I think that's the importance of like connecting with people and really like placing emphasis on the value of those connections. Like for myself, it lights me up that I get to have these conversations where I'm actually getting to learn more about people and like deepen friendships and stuff like that. Like when I went to the fitness summit in 2019, you were one of the people that like made time to talk to me. And I was like, what's he doing talking to me? I'm new here. Like, but that meant a lot and that was really cool. And then from there, I've been able to build onto that. And I found that during the pandemic, I've really flexed my internet friend making skills and networked with a lot of people. Like it's been super cool to have that opportunity.
It's been really weird, right? Like I feel like my friendships have actually deepened without seeing anyone. Like it's really weird. Like again, we talk about Dean. Dean obviously introduced us, and I count Dean as like one of my best friends in the world. And I've seen Ben, Ben House a few times, but again, I count him as one of my closest friends. And like Dean and I have only been in the same room like 5 times. Right. And like, but we literally talk every day. I mean, it's hilarious. So my wife and her girlfriends, I mean, like if I don't hear from him in 24 hours, like I have to message him and see, and same with Ben. Like if I don't talk to Ben, like Ben's, he's a little bit more esoteric. So like, 3 to 5 times a week is important for him. But like, yeah, Dean, if I don't talk to him daily, it's like, I'm like, uh-oh, is everything okay? But it's been cool. Like I've loved like how my friendships have grown. Because I think we all realized how important they are, right? Like it went from like, we're just like in this industry and we have some people we're cool with and whatever it is, but that's just the thing. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, like these people are really important to me and I need to make sure that they know that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, speaking of Dean, like he's one of my go-to guys too. Like he's helped me since the beginning of my training career, and throughout the pandemic, I probably was on the other chat line, like bugging him when he had a little breaks from answering your messages. He was answering my messages, poor guy. Yeah. But something that I wanted to bring up as another topic is food being fuel. So when somebody is like, food is fuel, how do you react? Open-ended question.
Like, come on, get the fuck out of here. Cool. You're so hard ass. And I know why people do it, right? Like they're trying to tell themselves this story that they don't need food for these other pieces, right? That they can just fuel their bodies because that's all that's important. Listen, first of all, it's not just fuel. like the most disciplined people in the world are professional bodybuilders when it comes to nutrition. There's nobody that even comes close, right? And Brian, another mutual friend of ours, Brian Cron, he brings up all the time about how I think it's like Dorian Yates was saying like he couldn't like go out of the house because he would have dreams that he would drive through like a McDonald's or whatever and get like a burger. And there was even some bodybuilders, I've heard tons of stories of like they're cheating on their diets in the hotel room because they're like dreaming about food and they wake up and like before a big show. Like if food was just fuel, then those guys would not like, because food is inextricably tied to everything we do or are as human beings. Religion, holidays, death, life, birth, all of these things almost always have a food component, a food connection. If you come from anywhere in the country, like if you're, an immigrant of first, second, third order, your food is a large part of your identity, of how your parents and grandparents connect you to that old world. Religion. I mean, people, literally, Judaism kept people from dying because it was like, hey, you probably should not eat pork because back then pork was probably not a great thing to eat, right? Don't eat shellfish because guess what? You're probably going to get some kind of weird food poisoning and die. Nowadays, we take some Pedialyte, we're fine. But we think about the role that food has had and the inextricable ties to everything. I travel solely for food. Like, I can tell you where I eat in Paris. I can tell you where to eat in 5 different cities in Italy. I can tell you the best pig brain tacos in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Like, that is all that matters to me when I travel.
Well, I'm glad that you were passionate about it. Like there is a lot to take away from that, and also just the importance of acknowledging that and promoting that to people who might feel like maybe they're broken because they were told that they shouldn't be passionate about different dishes, or that they shouldn't indulge at like a family get together, or like whatever it is for them, like enjoying a dish like in moderation. There's nothing wrong with that. And like some experiences that I've had in the last couple of years are like friends helping to reassure me that like I had a key role in their life because they made a big family meal and then they did a porch drop off for me. Like that was huge. That was like life changing. That was like a flashbulb moment for me. And if food was just fuel, I would miss out on that. So I'm equally passionate about these things. And one day I look forward to learning about your recommendations of places to eat and figuring out about this. Did you say pig brain earlier? Was that the dish that you...
Oh, yeah. Pig. Like, so there's this place I had these... Well, there's this Pozole. There's a little town. My wife, when she started a jewelry company, we went down to Mexico to try and find a factory because there's this very famous place about 3 hours from Mexico City, maybe 4. That is a very famous town for silver and gold making. So we were down there meeting with this factory owner, and we went. They had this dish called pozole, which is this big hominy corn soup that's amazing, and they're famous for that. But when we were there, the guy's like, "Hey, let's get these pig brain tacos." And I think he was probably like, "Hey, we're gonna scare these gringos with this thing." And I'm like, "All right, I'll eat this. I'll try whatever." And it's one of my favorite things ever. And of course, we're talking about this meal we had was like, 5 courses and drinks and all this stuff. And I think it was like $26 or something, like it was crazy, but it was incredible. Did you like in Kansas City, when I went to Kansas City, the first night I was there, the first time I went, didn't know anyone. And, I was like, "Hey guys, I got a car. I'm going to get barbecue." And I remember people were like, "Well, this place has 2 locations. The one is in this, it's down in the city. It's kind of ghetto. It's a little, I wouldn't go there. I go to the one in the suburbs." I was like, "So you people don't know shit about barbecue because you never go to get barbecue in the suburbs." I was like, "I'm from Brooklyn. We're going downtown. Anyone want to come with me? Let's go." and so we went down and yeah, I'm researching like the best barbecue place in Kansas City because Kansas City is known for barbecue. So that's what I'm doing. But like that, and I'm there for a fitness summit.
Well,
take for what you will.
You highlighted a lot of really key points as far as like living a good like human experience. And what I'll add on to is just the fact that like my best holidays were not the all-inclusive resorts. My best holidays were when I had a backpack on and we went from like hostel to hostel. I've had holidays where I've gone to Hawaii and we camped on beaches, and some of it was allowed and some of it was not allowed. Some sites are you can't go there anymore. And I'm glad that I went there when I did, because I got to experience that. And I felt like I was in the middle of a Jurassic Park movie. And it's just like, you don't get to experience that when you kind of go and do like the common things, the things that's like, people are thinking, this is the only way where you can find success, or like the diets where it's like, in order to, be happy, you need to follow this plan. You can't possibly enjoy your holiday or your family celebration or whatever pertains to that person's life. And so in highlighting the ways to really get more out of life, I think that's a good thing to have on the podcast, because then it actually enhances their life rather than just like continuing to echo the same like calorie deficit. Like that does nothing for anybody.
And I've never gained weight on vacation. Not once. I mean, I'm also one that I kind of have to fight to keep weight on because I'm not naturally that big. But like, if you think about so we talk again about like, people are like, oh, they overeat and whatever. If you're being mindful, you won't overeat, because overeating is not a mindful activity. When people are overeating, they're generally mindlessly shoving stuff in their mouth. If you're taking time to explore flavors, if you're taking time to explore the scent, if you're taking time to immerse yourself in a cultural experience of eating a meal in a different country that maybe has roots that go back 3,000 or 4,000 years, you're not going to mindlessly eat a bunch of crap and feel terrible afterwards. You're like, and the very interesting thing, and I found this in my research on mindfulness, was that we associate hedonic desire with impulsivity or lack of control. It's actually quite the opposite. When you are really immersed in the hedonic portions of food, meaning that explosion of flavor, the sense, really taking the entirety of the situation in from a sensory standpoint, you're not going to be impulsive. You're actually going to be mindful, and you're going to take that time because you're taking time with food. So being in that experience, and then, tip of the hat to Dean's project, you're going to probably be getting like 20,000 steps a day when you're traveling. So you're probably fine. I hate when I see people, and again, hey, if you like all-inclusive resorts or cruises, that's cool, but like, you're probably going to be pretty sedentary. You're probably going to drink way too much, and you're probably going to eat food that's not really that great, but it's just free. So like, that's why I'll never do it. Cause like, I'm going to go to restaurants anyways. I'm not going to stay on the thing. And I don't drink. So it's wasted money for me. But I think a lot of times part of the problem with holidays is people are so stressed out. They drink their face off and eat a bunch of mediocre food because they're just trying to de-stress, and they come back feeling worse. And the purpose of a holiday is to get rid of that, to leave that shit at home, go down there, enjoy yourself wherever you're going, and then come back refreshed so you can kind of have some vigor.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I've always looked at like, I've often referred to my short little trips that maybe I drive to the mountains or something. I call them vision quests, because I'm often going there to be mindful in some sense, like going on a long ass walk, or just processing things that are going on in my life and really breaking it down into, like, you talked about the pros and cons list. Like, I'll kind of go through the pros and the cons of what I'm going through and what I have control of to create a change. Like, I once went on a walk to the mountain, like in the mountains, drove there. And throughout that, I realized that like to start being a trainer wasn't nearly as complicated as what I made it out to be. Like, it facilitated career changes for me. And the most productive trips like that I did were the ones where I didn't really have any alcohol. Like, I might have had a few samples at like a brewery, but it wasn't an overindulgence. It wasn't a party. It wasn't to numb the thoughts in my head. I leaned into the thoughts and enjoyed them.
That's the key. But there's nothing wrong with alcohol, right? Mm-hmm. But it's same with food. There's nothing wrong with food. But if you're using it as a coping mechanism, there might be something to look at there. If you're using it to numb thoughts or like to get you away, if you're using it to escape, well, unfortunately, we don't escape, right? Because the booze wears off and we're still there. Same with the food. And I know that there's people out there who are going to try and argue with me about the differences that food is not addictive, because people don't understand that addiction is actually a behavioral issue, and dependency is the physiological issue. So when we look to things like cocaine, there is no physical withdrawal. It's 100% emotional and mental. So in that vein is like, does that mean cocaine is not addictive? Because guess what? You withdraw from alcohol or benzos, you die, right? If it's serious enough. Heroin, you get really sick. Cocaine, you're going to be really shitty and you're going to be in a bad mood. The behavioral implications that occur with people who have maybe binge eating disorder, who have a gambling problem, who have a, sex addiction, they look exactly like alcohol and drugs look from a behavioral aspect. And I can tell you from personal experience, like I said, I've been to 5 rehabs. I've been to a few detoxes. I've been to jails. I work with a lot of people, and I look at the behaviors and I look at the patterns, and the food looks exactly like my story. Unfortunately, you just don't, there's not as many negative connotations because you're not drinking and driving or doing, committing crimes or being violent. But the cool thing for me is I don't drink. My solution. Someone who has a food problem, guess what? Still got to eat. So, and again, I think the fitness industry in general is full of people that don't have a lot of understanding of anything outside of their very tiny bubble. And so say things that I think are stupid, like food's not addictive, because they don't actually understand what addiction is from a behavioral aspect. And, I get a lot of shit for that, but I don't really care. But it's filled with people that are 22 and just get through on will and think that they're special. And, that changes over time.
Well, I mean, to add some context to probably why I gravitate towards your content so much, like when I was a kid, I was active. We had a long driveway. I'd get lots of steps. I grew up in the country, so I could get away with a lot of just essentially binge eating. I would come home from school and have 3 pudding cups, 8 granola bars, and 8 brownies. My mom would bake goods all the time. Emotional eating has always been a thing for me. If I feel sad or upset, I turn to emotional eating, mindless eating, all these things. And so going into the fitness industry with this as my background has made me much more emotionally intelligent and empathetic to people who struggle with it, where I'm not going to waste any time telling them that food is fuel or to get into a calorie deficit because of my background and my experiences and how hard I know it is. And just to give credit to the content that you put out, you talk about the importance of community. And that's what kind of drew me towards the spin community, because I found like-minded people. And then I went from that and I leaned more into the trainer community. And throughout the pandemic, I created a community of trainers and people on my podcast. And I lean on that all the time. And so hopefully people understand why I like your stuff, I promote your stuff, and I'm often nodding my head as you're talking about stuff, not only because of the years that you have on me and the life experience that you have on me and the amount that I could learn from someone like you, but also because so much of my own personal background really brings up a lot of the reasons why I do what I do, why I talk the way I talk, and why I care about the things that I care about and talk about the things that I talk about, kind of thing. Because it's we're shaped by the things that we go through and we wouldn't choose to go through them, but having survived them or moved forward or grown, that's what creates our strengths, and that's what creates our talking points later on in life.
Yeah, totally. And I'm one that I'm pretty sure if most people if we lined up life experience, there's some cool things there that I would, but I think most people would probably not take mine, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I am who I am because of everything I've gone through. And I'm appreciative of that. Like it's, like, does it suck that I don't even know it sucks. Like, because I can't drink. Like, yeah, I mean, like, I loved good wine. But I just know that I can't have it. So guess what? Tough shit. Like, there's a lot worse things I could deal with. But I'm thankful for all of the struggles, the tribulations, because like I am who I am because of it, and I'm happy with who I am. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think a lot of times people confuse. I'm super empathetic, and my social media presence, like Dean always laughs. He's like, everyone thinks you're like, Yoda and like all chill. And he's like, you're a goddamn psycho. And I'm like, yeah, I totally am. Like every once in a while, someone will come on my post and, make some bullshit kind of aggressive thing toward, especially my big sore spot is kind of picking on people that can't defend themselves. It always has been. When I was a kid, I used to like beat up bullies. Like I was a small kid, but like bullies would pick on some other small kid and I just punch him in the mouth. Like that was my thing. And I always did. But like, that's my thing. So if someone comes on like one of my posts and basically implies in any way, shape or form that overweight people are lazy or anything like that, like I'm a pit bull. Like I will go to the jugular, and like people are like, Jesus, you're an aggressive like psycho. I'm like, you're right. Like don't confuse my kindness for weakness. Like I don't ever want that to come across. Like understand who I am and where I come from, because you're going to get that guy. Because I am looking to protect these people who I see as fragile right now that have a lot of strength. And I want them to be able to express that. And I don't want some, jackass 22-year-old kid who thinks that discipline is greater than motivation because he listened to Jocko Willink on how to be a man coming in and talking to someone. And especially when they're like, fat people are lazy. I'm like, that's funny because I have overweight clients who make like $15 million a year. Are they lazy? Well, how much do you make? You're in your parents' basement, you make 15 grand a year. So are you the lazy one? Like, no, I'm in shape. I was like, oh, that's the factor. Okay. All right, cool. And so I'll get really, I'll get aggressive with that. Because that's the one thing I do not tolerate.
Well, I mean,
but for the most part,
I love that. That's awesome. Like that, the world needs more of that, because otherwise it's just we're spinning our wheels and getting nowhere, and people aren't getting sometimes the brutal, blunt help that they need. Sometimes they just need a friend in their corner. Sometimes they just need someone that, as you said, just sees the strength, sees what could be, and fosters it, nurtures it, like protects it, kind of thing.
I'm always going to advocate for my people, like, and especially because I understand the complexities of obesity. It's this, and again, and a lot of this probably my own bias, right? Being an alcoholic, the views on alcohol and drugs are very different now than when the first time I went to rehab. Like I saw it as a moral failing. I thought I just wasn't strong enough. I thought I wasn't disciplined enough. No one in my life would ever say that I'm like I'm like borderline. I am definitely not borderline. I actually am obsessive compulsive disorder. I have that. In that, like, I am very regimented. Like, I am, quote unquote, very disciplined. But I couldn't stop drinking. Couldn't do it. I mean, we're talking, it took me 20 plus years, right? From the first time I tried to quit. And I see people who are the same way with food. And so I am not going to let someone say that this is a moral failing, because it's not. There's so many things that go into that. And this implication within the fitness industry that if someone was just, good, or if they weren't being lazy, or if they just would, cook their food at home or do all these things. First of all, that's the lazy view. That to me is the lazy person. And it's a fitness professional saying, it's easy to, cook healthy, or it's easy to do this, it's easy to do that. It's not easy. It's not easy. If you're a single mom working 3 jobs, or, like I said, my clientele is all way more educated than me, way wealthier than me, way smarter than me. And they struggle with these things that I can manage to do. Right. Mm-hmm. Mom might make, $1.2 million a year in finance, but she's still working 15 hours a day trying to give her kids the life that they want. Right.
Well, like there's a lot of context there for people to draw from and for people to kind of understand why like the minutia of life matters, like why it's important to really learn about the people you're working with. Like take some time to understand how individual we all are and learn about that person's backstory and get to know like what they're doing outside of like whether it be the training session or the nutrition coaching session or offline or whatever it be, because all of those things are going to play into the long-term sustainable outcomes that we really desire as people in this space who are passionate about helping people get back on their feet and stay there kind of thing.
And to me, like I take it as a responsibility of me to help educate other people in the industry. I think I found a very solid, for lack of a better term, tribe. I don't have a big circle of people I trust with gaining information from. It's very limited. And I have gatekeepers that kind of let me know what information is good and bad. I'm very lucky in that aspect. But yeah, it's been a huge benefit to be in an industry where there are super accessible, super intelligent, brilliant people that are willing to share. It's pretty cool. And you've seen it. Like there's a lot of, people complain about our industry a lot. You just gotta associate with people and it's great. I just don't associate with the people that I mean, trust me, there's people that everybody loves that just we're not going to have like, I don't like their views on much of anything, and they're super popular and have lots of Instagram followers. I'll never want to be associated with them. If someone's like, hey, let me put you guys together, I'm like, no, thanks. Like that's not, I don't want that. Mm-hmm. I'd rather keep my circle small and keep my following, wrapped up in my values, than like I never want to be a part of the marketing world that claims that they're fitness people. It's not my world. And even though that's totally where we met, the Kansas City the Fitness Summit, it's really just a marketing summit where people work out some. Not my world. It's cool. Like I made great friends through that. I mean, like you, Andrew, Marcus Wolford, who's probably one of the most interesting human. You need to have him on the podcast.
Oh, I should
talk about interesting human beings. Like he is like every time he talks, I'm always just like, dude, like he's on a unicorn. Talking about being vegan at one point, squatting 550 pounds. That guy's nuts. But like him, Dean, I mean, technically I know Dean because they went to the Fitness Summit the year I wasn't there and met Mike Dola. Mike, I know not from Fitness Summit. We were there at the same time. We didn't meet there, but we became good friends afterwards. I mean, Mike T. Nelson, another great friend of mine who, through him and Dean led me to Ben. It's just like, it's a beautiful place if you take the time to find your people.
Mm-hmm. And that's so true. That kind of mirrors my experience with it. Like, I'm not going to be everybody's person. Not everybody's going to be my person. But if I'm careful and if I pay attention to little things and have meaningful conversations, not just surface level, not just looking for the people who are the most popular in the room, but looking for the people who best align with me while also challenging me to continue to learn and to grow and to lean in kind of thing. To keep us on track for time, I want to ask you one question that is going to kind of put you on the spot, but it's essentially all you have to do is give a challenge for the day to the audience. So something that you think would be meaningful, that maybe aligns with what you bring to the world, that you think if a person does it, it'll make their lives better. So whenever you're ready, you just say your challenge for the day is, and just let them have it.
Your challenge for the day is to figure out what your priority is, your number one value. And remember, like losing weight's not a value. Like, I would look up James Clear has a really good thing on his website. If you search James Clear values, I kind of stole his to use for my clients because it's a good exhaustive list. Find a value on there, find a priority, and see if that actually lines up with how you're living your life. I have, if you go to my Instagram, you can see it. Also, if you look up values and food on the mind values, you can see it as well. I have something called a values-based action plan that I have all my clients do, and it's basically how to get your actions, your behaviors to align with your values. If you can align your actions and behaviors with your values, smooth sailing. Everything's easy, because it's really easy to make a values-based decision, because it'll always be the right one. Can't be wrong if it aligns with your values.
I think that's important, and I hope people actually do that. And I'll make it easy for them by adding all the links to your social media, your website, everything into the episode description. So if people are thinking, I'm going to go do that, they better go and click on it and action that. But with that being said, I'd like to thank you so much for making time for me today and having this awesome conversation. So thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, man, it's great to talk to you again. Thanks, buddy.